Hi, everyone. Today's episode starts us off in Tennessee, where a group of friends shares a description of the hideous creature that stalked and chased them in the woods. And then we head slightly east to West Virginia to hear the details of a terrifying local legend that is impossible to forget. Finally, we end up in Pennsylvania, where a listener walking home is suddenly knocked to the ground. You won't believe what he encountered. So kick up your heels, get comfortable, and let's get into the stories. My friends and I weren't planning on doing any hiking. We just wanted to get out and enjoy nature and get away from where anyone could bother us. It was August and the weekend before college started back up again, so a lot of our friends were busy or already gone. Anyway, we were just driving around, hanging out, and decided to go for a short hike in One.Meeman-Shelby forest near where we lived in Tennessee. We figured it would just be fun to wander in the woods, so we parked our car on a small gravel lot, found a trailhead, and headed off. We had no real destination, we were just wandering for the fun of it. So after wandering a bit, we came to this open clearing and decided that we wanted to hang out there, at least for a bit. We weren't hikers after all, and we didn't even have proper shoes on or anything. Jennifer even had on flip-flops. So we plopped ourselves down on some downed trees and just sat there laughing and talking. Honestly, we had no sense of time at that point, and before we knew it, the sun started setting. I don't even think any of us noticed it was happening at first, but once the darkness really started to set in, we all snapped to it a bit, and we realized we're in the woods, without flashlights, and we could now barely see 10 feet in front of us. So after trying to make ourselves feel okay by laughing about how ridiculous this was, and how stupid we had been, Jennifer pulled out her phone out of her pocket and turned on the flashlight. After some fidgeting, she gets it to work and turns around, shining the light directly in all of our faces. We winced, blinking as she did it. It went into all of our eyes. "You idiots, just turn on your flashlights on your phones." She was acting like she was the only one who knew how to do anything. But the next sound out of her mouth was a loud shriek as her phone stopped shining on us and illuminated the area next to us. We all turned in the direction of the light, and that's when we saw it. It was just behind the first tree, off to our left. It was huge and had sort of dog-like features, but human-like in shape. It had long arms with basically human hands, although they were covered completely in fur. And speaking of fur, the fur glistened like it was wet or something. But I'm not totally sure about that. I mean, I could have been confused because of how dark it was at this point. But despite the darkness, and for some reason, I do remember realizing for an absolute fact that it had eyes that literally glowed in the dark. Amber-colored eyes that had an intelligence to them, like when you look into the eyes of an ape and you feel like you're looking at a human. It was that kind of a feeling. The creature stood rooted, staring at us for a long time, just watching, probably to see what we would do. And then without warning, it let out this blood-curdling scream before taking a slow step towards us. The thing's head was scraping against the branches above it, which just didn't seem possible to me. They were really high up there. And that scream surely echoed far through the woods. I also remember thinking I could only hope that somebody else heard it, and that they were maybe even calling the police. None of us moved, despite the fact that it was coming right at us, and then Jennifer screamed again, and it shook us out of our trances. Then we all ran as fast as we could back towards our original direction. We were stumbling over each other, not being able to see properly, and not having good trail shoes. It's honestly a wonder I'm even still alive to tell you about this. Anyway, we kept fumbling and didn't stop running until we came to a crossroads in the trail, and I had no idea which way to go from there. We were all just running on adrenaline at this point and not thinking at all, just reacting and yelling at each other. I was the furthest behind in the group, and just as I could see them all pausing at the crossroads, I heard a branch snap behind me. I screamed, which made them react, then they all scattered. All three of them went running in different directions. I don't know if they were consciously thinking to split up for safety or something, but at that point, I'm also not really sure if any of us knew what to do, besides get away. I took a deep breath, trying to decide which group to follow, and that's when I heard the thing scream again, so loudly that it sounded like it was right on top of me. I swung back my head and realized it had been pretty much on top of me the whole time, but only made the sound just then. It glared back at me and hissed and growled and stomped its feet. Thank God I had enough wits about me to start running again. I'm not sure how far I ran or how long, but I do know that the thing kept up with me, hissing and growling the entire time. It seemed like it took forever for it to stop, and I honestly don't remember exactly when it did. At one point, it was just no longer there. Obviously, it could have caught me at any time, I know that, so I have no idea why it didn't. Did it just lose interest? Was it toying with me, or just scaring us all to the point of leaving? I wandered around for a long time after that and eventually found my friends. I had wandered quietly because I was too afraid to call out for them. Jennifer started sobbing as soon as she saw me and said she was scared to death that I had been the creature's next meal. I told her I couldn't imagine what she had been through either. The whole thing was just so surreal. We all had definitely just had the scariest experience of our lives. After a while, we all calmed down, made it back to the car. We talked about it and agreed not to talk about it for a while. After all, we all thought that nobody would have believed us anyway. We all promised that we would say nothing about it and just pretend like it never happened. So we all went back to our homes and our lives and more or less didn't think about it a lot. We still see each other from time to time, but we don't really discuss what happened. And now that was nearly a year ago, and none of us have ever even mentioned hiking or going into the woods again. It's sort of an unsaid thing between us. I keep having nightmares though, and I really think I'm going to reach out to Jennifer to see how she's feeling. I don't think she'll mind me mentioning it, but for now I just needed to get it off my chest, and that's why I'm writing to you. When I look back on it, I really don't think the creature was trying to actually catch us. For some reason, I just feel like it was making sounds to frighten us away from something. Like maybe it was protecting its young or keeping us away from a territory. Who knows? The bottom line is that I'm not sure what it's protecting out there, but I am sure that I'm never going to find out. I honestly don't know if I ever want to hike at all, ever again. Over the years, there have been no shortage of strange stories coming out of West Virginia. The state is so full of supernatural tales that it's hard to pick and choose which ones are the most compelling. But there is one story in particular that stands out to me because I've heard it 1,000 times. Basically been hearing it all my life, and I was born in 1975. It's sort of like legend here, at least in my family. The story comes from my hometown of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which lies on the Ohio River in northwestern West Virginia, right at the Ohio border. The area is known for its many strange encounters. Some of these include sightings of ape-like creatures, Mothman, UFOs, and more. We even have an actual dedicated Mothman museum in our town, which should tell you something about the place. So I'm now going to relay to you the story of two women in our town. It's the story I've heard my whole life, and I wanted to share it with you here. The first story involves a woman who was driving down a dark stretch of Route 62, headed out of Point Pleasant at around 2 a.m. one night, when she noticed an unusual animal standing at the edge of the road. It wasn't moving, so she couldn't get a good handle on the exact shape of it. At first, she thought it was a deer, but as she got closer, she realized that it was something much stranger. Its silhouette was sort of that of a human, but it had the head of an animal, meaning the head looked to be hairy and very dark in color. She wasn't sure what to make of it, but it was so strange looking that she felt compelled to stop and take a closer look. She was actually sort of worried that it could be someone who needed help. She stopped and slowly brought her vehicle to a rolling stop just near it. But as she opened the door and started to get out of her car, the creature began to move towards her, walking with a slow gait. And that's when she realized that it wasn't just standing upright temporarily. It was actually walking towards her on two legs and walking normally, as if that's the way it always walked. She sat there with the door open but still in the car, watched as it approached her, walking with a very human-like step pattern. She was terrified that it was coming to attack her, and it just kept coming closer and not taking its eyes off of her until it was standing right in front of her car. She was now able to get the full view of it. It was definitely not human or anything like anything she'd ever seen before. It was about 7 feet tall, very muscular, with dark fur covering its body, and it had the head of a coyote. So without thinking, without having any control over it, she started screaming and waving her arms, trying to scare it off. And it worked. The creature stopped, flung its arms around in a crazy kind of a way, and then ran towards the woods. And suddenly, it was gone, disappearing into the darkness. She was so startled by this that she jumped back into her car and sped off as fast as she could. She later told authorities that she wasn't sure what the creature was, but it was something that they definitely needed to be taking seriously. She described it to them as being something like a wolf or a large dog that stood taller than her shoulders and had very long front legs that allowed it to stand upright and walk that way. The police looked at her in a way that she later said made her feel stupid, but she was adamant that she saw what she saw and that it was real. And then, a few weeks later, a second woman had a very similar encounter with the same creature. She too was driving on Route 62 late at night when she noticed something strange standing at the side of the road. She didn't stop. She continued driving by, but as she got closer, she realized that it was some kind of a creature she had never seen before. She described it as very tall, this one standing at least 7 feet tall with the head of an animal, but she couldn't tell what kind either, and it too began walking towards her on 2 legs. But then it suddenly disappeared into the darkness. Now, she never did get out of her car or scream, but it was basically the same story occurring in the same area. She then sped away quickly, as fast as she could, but she kept glancing over her shoulder and looking into her rearview mirror to make sure it wasn't following. Once she reached a well-lit area, she stopped and looked back again, but saw nothing. She decided to report the incident to the local police station once morning came around. But when she got there and told her story, she too was met with skepticism by the officers on duty. However, they did take down her information and said that if any similar reports came in, they would contact her. But no follow-up ever occurred for either woman, or so that's how the story goes in my town. So I'm not sure what happened after that. I've heard this story many times over the years, and I have no idea what this animal really was or why it was there in the first place. Was it some kind of a cryptid? A mutant dog, perhaps? Or was it something even stranger? I guess we may never know for sure. Have you ever heard of this creature, or do you live in the area? If you've had a similar encounter, please let us know in the comments below. This encounter takes place in State College, Pennsylvania, in October of 2019. Jared and his mom lived together, just the two of them in central Pennsylvania near State College. State College is a college town, home to Penn State University, and it's right in the center of Pennsylvania. The area is surrounded by large tracts of farmland and an expanse of Appalachian mountain ranges and forests. Basically, the surrounding areas are very rural, with acres of untouched land. It was October, and the leaves were falling off the trees, and the town was full of students as classes were in full swing. The air was getting colder, and the days shorter, though, so evenings were starting to get a bit less crowded on the streets than the previous few months. Jared's mom and dad had divorced 2 years ago, and it seemed like his mom was working all the time, trying to make ends meet. So he found himself home alone a lot, but he knew that it wasn't his mom's fault. And also, he helped around the house. He had just turned 17 the previous month and was definitely mature for his age. Today, he had gotten home from school and read the note that his mom had left before she went to work. It said, "Hey, sweetie, I hope you had a good day at school. I didn't have time to go grocery shopping today, so can you please just do it for me? Here's the list and some money. Love you." So he did. He went to the grocery store. He got the things on the list, added a 6-pack of Coke for himself, and started walking home. It was a short walk, but it was fall and now getting dark out earlier. This particular day was a cloudy day, and Jared had his hoodie up and covered his ears, which meant that he couldn't really see or hear too much as he walked home. He was walking on the path that led from his house to the grocery store, a path through a park that he had taken a million times before. The leaves were crunching under his feet, and he could see his breath in the air. He was starving and thinking about the chicken he was going to make for dinner when he sort of heard a noise behind him. It sounded like something large was moving through the woods towards him. He turned around, but he saw nothing, just the trees swaying in the wind. He shrugged it off and turned back around and continued walking, but he did pull his hoodie off of his head. And that's when he heard it again. And this time it sounded even closer. He started walking faster, but whatever was making the noise was also walking faster now too. Jared began to run, but before he could get far, whatever was chasing him caught up to him, and he felt something bump into him from behind. He fell forward to the ground, and the groceries broke out from the plastic bags that he was carrying. They scattered all over the path. While still on the ground, Jared turned his body around, only to see a large, wolf-like creature looming over him. It was taller than he was when he was standing at full height, and its fur was a dirty gray color. It had yellow eyes that seemed to almost glow in the darkness, and it was staring down at him with its eyes burning into his. Jared was frozen with fear. His thoughts immediately went to trying to figure out if the creature was going to harm him. But the creature didn't attack him. It just stood there, looking down at him. Jared watched as it breathed heavily, making puffs of air that came out of its mouth and condensed on its nose. After a few minutes, it turned and walked away, disappearing into the woods. Jared lay there for a few moments longer, trying to process what had just happened. He had never seen anything like that before. He didn't know if he should call the police or just get himself home. He decided that he needed to get home right away. So he pulled himself up, left all of the groceries because he now had no way to carry them, and he ran the rest of the way home, not stopping until he was inside. He instantly locked all the windows and the doors and then called his mom and described to her what had happened. She instantly called the police. She wasn't even sure that it had been the creature that Jared described, but it was clear to her that something not right had happened. His voice had made that very clear to her. The police came and talked to Jared and took a report saying they would head over to the park to see what they could find. But in the end, they didn't find anything. And when they went out to look for the creature, nothing was there. The strangest part was that they didn't even find the groceries that Jared said he had dropped and left behind. It was almost as if the entire thing hadn't happened. It crossed Jared's mind that the creature could have picked up the groceries and taken them, but the whole thing was just so bizarre. No surprise, Jared never went back to that park again, and he still thinks about that creature sometimes when he's alone at night. Was it real? Or did he just imagine it? No one else can confirm other than him, and the experience has him so shook up that he's not even sure what to believe anymore. Let me know what you think about these stories in the comments below. And don't forget to check out Donovan Dread, who releases almost every single day. Also, if you like true crime, then check out Donovan Dread True Crime. There are new releases several times a week.